This time on PedalBox, it is the rebuild of the Rodius. I'm going to try and get all the suspension apart on this side and see whether my gamble on buying Rexton springs is going to pay off. So if you're just joining this build, this is the Rodius that the Autopian had as their staff car to get to and from Goodwood and their accommodation, and it's been to a couple of other events under the stewardship of Adrian Clark, but this is ultimately what Torch, Bo and David used to get around with Adrian when they're at Goodwood, and it has come to the end of its usable life, at least in its current form, because it ran out of MOT, or will run out of MOT in about a week's time. Now it's got a broken spring on this side and a CV joint, well a CV boot that needs replacing. The CV joint so far seems to be fine, and realistically it needs a bunch of other stuff including discs, pads, wheel bearing, potentially a little bit of welding on the subframe at the back, and a few other things. We've sort of gone through some of this in a previous episode. I'll go through that a little bit more in this one and actually go through the MOT on camera with all of the things we're going to do once the new parts get here, because they should be arriving by 2 o'clock today. Let's ignore the fact that it's nearly 4 o'clock right now, but that's not the point. I'm going to take this apart and start work because whilst it's still sunny outside, it's meant to be peeing down with rain tomorrow, and I can do the rebuild on this strut in the garage once I've tidied that up and hopefully when the parts get here. So this should be as easy as undoing the top mount bolts underneath the bonnet. I think there's 3 of them and 1 on the lower control arm. I say easy, I have absolutely no idea whether it's going to be that easy or not, and how much other stuff I need to take out. As you can see, it's kind of encapsulated in this upper arm, and if I can avoid it, I don't want to disturb anything I don't have to. I'm going to have to take this ball joint off to take the hub out in order to do the wheel bearing, and obviously the calipers and the discs are going to have to come off as well. So if I need to move any of that, I'll work on trying to get these apart as well, so they're not in the way and just dangling around a big heavy mass that we're ultimately going to get rid of regardless. So we need to get in and try and release this bolt at the bottom and then these 3 on the top. I'm going to have a look at what the problem is going to be up the top first. So if you want to join me under the bonnet, I'll show you what we're dealing with. I've taken the battery out, partly because there might be a drain in the system and partly because it's in the way of the camera seeing down into the top mount. And the top mount itself is actually fairly easy to get to. I can get right down on top of the 3 mounting bolts, which is really pleasant. I genuinely wasn't expecting it to be that easy. Whether or not those bolts are going to come apart that easily is a different matter altogether. We'll see how much I've just cursed myself for either this side or that side. I can already tell you that that side is going to be worse because over there's a bunch of fluid reservoirs right above the top mount. So these are a 14mm, and first one, not too bad. A little bit stiff, but you expect them to be fairly tight, you know, suspension and all that being fairly important. And this is number 3. Ooh, that one's a lot tougher. Oh. Nope, that's going to require the breaker bar. Success! All 3 bolts, not too bad. I'll call that a win. We just had a quick rain shower here, which was a little bit inconvenient, but I did manage to get the bolt at the bottom undone. No major dramas. It's a 19 on one side and an 18mm nut on the other. It's a lock nut, which is good, apart from the fact that the threads are fairly chewy, they're full of rust, and obviously it's a lock nut, so it's difficult to turn anyway. So it is putting up a little bit of a fight. But while I was doing that, I was looking around and I worked out that there's going to be no way that I can extend the suspension further down to try and get the top mount out from the body and then finagle it around everything else. So I am going to have to pretty much completely dismantle this corner of the car in order to get the spring out. So if we're doing that, we might as well take the disc off, the caliper off, get into this and remove as much weight as possible if we're going to have to manhandle this whole section of car around just to get these out and dismantle the upper arm, probably some of the lower arm, maybe the anti-roll bar link, which the more I look at it makes me think I should have just ordered 2 of those as well, because the bushings at the top are fairly cracked. I can't imagine the anti-roll bar does a huge amount on this thing, but maybe for the cost of them it would have been nice to buy them. We'll see whether or not this spring replacement comes off, and if it doesn't and I have to order more, maybe I'll add a couple of them on. Now getting the caliper off means we're going to have to deal with some of that CV grease which has launched itself all over here. Wow, that's a lot of CV grease coming out of there. That is horrible. That's almost half an inch thick on the bottom side of this oh, I should have had gloves on. I hate CV grease. That was a huge amount of grease that had piled up around all of those bolts, and it was definitely CV grease. It was the right colour, consistency, everything. That wasn't just road goo that had kind of accumulated around this. So I took a vast amount of that off and got rid of it all and found the 2 bolts that I was looking for, which were the caliper carriers, which are 19mm each. One is down the bottom on the inside, just about there, I guess, and the other one is at the top here. And I have a funny feeling these are going to be really, really difficult to release. Oh. I managed to just barely release that, but it is still far too tight. Let me see if I can get the top before I completely give up on this endeavour. Nope, that ain't going. Okay, well that's the top one released. Okay, a few goes with the jack to loosen it, and now it is just barely slack enough that I can get this off. There we go. And they actually look in pretty good condition. The threads are nice and clean. Obviously it's rusty in the middle, you'd kind of expect that. The next problem I have is because of the massive lip on these discs, they are trying to hold this in place because it can't release enough to let that off. Sometimes the fix is leverage. These are twin cylinders, just twins on the back, but they are seriously big. I need to find a way to tether that because that's a lot heavier than I was expecting. Some of you have probably noticed a critical mistake. Whilst I had the caliper attached and I could put my foot on the brake to stop the rotor, I should have undone these 2 screws, because now when I put the Allen key in, they just turn, which is really inconvenient. And I don't want to use the gun on them because using it on an Allen key is just going to round them over. So I'm going to try and brace it off with the breaker bar through the wheel bolts like that. And hopefully that will give me, oh, that one was actually dead easy to do like that. That's pleasant. I wonder if this one's going to be as easy. Yes, yes it is. Okay, well that worked. And that was a lot less painful than I expected it to be. That was painless. Cool. Oh yeah, they are pretty badly worn on the outside edge there, and they are pretty badly lipped too. So I'm going to grind the edge of these down so we can get a caliper on and see what thickness these are actually down to, because I'm curious. I'm not going to reuse these. I've obviously bought the new ones already, but I am mildly curious to see how bad they were. Next up, we've got to get the castle nut off, and this has been pinched in around the end of the drive shaft. Those 2 off. Let's see if they matter which way round they are. They don't appear to. Now we can try and get the top apart, get this out, or actually no, I'm going to try and get the bottom out so that we have more room to flex this around. So there are 3 bolts underneath here on the bottom of the swing arm. Well, 3 nuts and bolts. The nuts appear to be 19s on the bottom, and the bolt heads are 19 on the top. That makes a nice change. That leaves a bit of a ringing in the ears. I probably should have gone and got some hearing protection after the first one, but I thought it can't be worse outside, and it was almost still exactly as bad. Next up, trying to pull the hub assembly out from even more grease without puncturing the boot on the driver down there. This might be a job for the crowbar. I'm an idiot. Took the nuts off, didn't take the bolts out. Let's try that again. Now we just need to, even more grease up the back of that. God. Oh, and I've used my rail for the stand for the caliper. Cool, that is moving though. Very slowly, but it is moving. Thanks to a lump hammer, I've now managed to get the ball joint apart. I think I've probably damaged one of the threads just a tiny bit, but I'm going to try and fix that with a tap, which I think I have in the drawer. If not, I might try and get one so that I have it for future reference. But ultimately, it's easier for me to repair a thread than it is to try and repair the boot. So it was more preferable just to give it a proper whack with this and hope that it came out. And it did. And in the meantime, I was also using some release agent, and I undid the one at the very top of the suspension as well. So this whole thing is basically ready to come apart. Nice! That actually went better than I expected. That's that one out. Now we just need this out from the top of here. Finally! Eventually have the bolt off on the lower suspension, and I'm just trying to wind it through. The threads on this end are gripping, so I'm just using that to my advantage to turn this out. Excuse if I'm a little bit breathless here. That was a fight to get that bolt out. And I've got to say, the bolt itself is in really good condition, other than the threads that have obviously been exposed to the atmosphere, which is what made that nylock nut nigh on impossible to get off. The rest of it actually looks fine, so the anti-roll bar off next so that I can drop this down. So since the bottom one is just spinning and spinning and I don't have a spanner thin enough to get down into there, and again I don't want to ruin the boot, I'm going to try and take it off at the top of the anti-roll bar, which is a 17 on the top and a 14 on the bottom. Wow, that was a lot easier than I expected it to be. Okay, well that's given me a little bit more room so that I can push this down. I'm just going to try and pry this out from underneath here and hope that it's a bit of spring pressure everywhere holding this in. Wow, that's still really well sprung, considering there's nothing holding this in. There's nothing causing this that should be causing this to spring back up. I'm genuinely amazed that there's quite as much tension in there as there is. That's genuinely surprising. Okay, I guess the bushings, the rubber bushings in there are gripping onto the housing and the outside, so that's what I'm actually fighting against at this point. So the problem is when I'm pulling down enough on this with the crowbar, this is nice and loose to get out because I'm not pushing it back up in. That's fine. The downside is that once this is all the way down that way, oh, I tell a lie, the whole thing comes apart perfectly. How easy was that? It's only taken, yeah, probably about 2.5 to 3 hours to get to this point. Don't do suspension, kids. Good news, we have successfully separated the strut assembly from the Rodius, along with the hub and the disc, which I guess we were going to have to do anyway at some point. Bad news, I still don't have a spring. Despite all the tracking information telling me that these were the whole set of packages, there's 3 of them coming, we're going to be here between 12 and 2 p.m. today. The first one arrived, which has a set of discs, all of the pads and a wheel bearing in. That arrived about 3 o'clock, so still late. The other 2, nothing. They were meant to be here at 2 o'clock as well. I haven't had an update to say they're going to be delayed, which I did for the other one. It said it was going to be between 12 and 4, and that update came at about 2:30. But even so, it was updated. It managed my expectations. The springs are just out for delivery, allegedly. So yeah, hopefully they will arrive tomorrow. I'm going to take this apart in the garage, get the spring compressors out and take this apart and just show you exactly how bad this crack is a little bit easier while it's not on the car. So I'm going to put all of this away, go in, probably have a beer and a sit down and do nothing for a couple of hours once I've achieved that. So we'll pick this up in the morning. Time to take the springs apart, and there is good news and bad news. The good news is the spring arrived. The bad news is it is significantly larger than the current spring on the strut. Now I'm not sure if this is going to be a problem, and there's a few reasons for why. This one is slightly smaller material than this, and the distance from the outside edge of the springs compressed compared to the ones currently on the strut is noticeably different. It's about 10 millimeters outside edge to outside edge. So I'm hopeful that this one will compress down the 70 something millimeters we need in order to fit into this strut assembly. This is 385 mil from the Rexton 2. This one I'm measuring at about 310. The 2.2 litre and 2 litre coil springs are 325 mil, would theoretically fit, but my guessing is that they are a lighter spring weight for a lighter engine and an all-round lighter setup in the car. So I'm not going to be able to do that. I don't think I'm going to get away with just using the shorter 2 litre springs on this strut, not to mention the part number on this strut specifically relates to the 375 mil springs. So as much as this looks comically oversized, I think we're still approximately right. To put the new spring on though, we have to get the old spring off, and that's where the bad news comes in. I have these little Widowmaker spring compressors, which are normally absolutely fine. However, they do not fit onto the coil. I cannot get them between the rings on this coil spring. I can get them on the bottom one because it steps down, it gets smaller, so that fits on there, but they just don't fit between. And I'm sure I could pry them open, get a pry bar in there and fit them in and fight them, but I don't think that's actually going to help me. Even if I was to just put a gun on the top of this and spring it and burst it across the driveway, getting this spring back on would still be a problem. Because it's so much longer compared to my spring compressor, I'm only going to be compressing 4, maybe 5 coils at the absolute best case, and I don't think I'm going to get 75 mil worth of compression across 4 or possibly 5 coils. So even if I just blew this apart on the table and put bits everywhere, I'm still not necessarily going to be able to get this spring back on, assuming it fits, assuming it's not too long anyway, and I have to take off 10 mil of length from the top of this spring with an angle grinder. I don't think these are going to work for what I need. Fortunately, however, I know a couple of people who have garages, and one of them, when I mentioned to them what I was doing, said, instead of taking your life in your hands, why not just bring it down to me? I know it's an hour away, but we can just put it in the big machine, do it properly, and save everybody a trip to A&E. So that's what I did. I came down to see Jeff at CMC, who has kindly offered his big 12,000 Newton meter spring compressor to try and solve my SsangYong problem. And we're going to try and put this spring onto this strut. Oh god, that's heavy. If we can make it all fit together. So the spring is now rigged in this massive spring compressor. We're going to try and compress this down and release it so we can take the top mount off without exploding it across all of this workshop. So hopefully that's all going to go well. Oh, is it on? There you go. Yep, that's broken. This is now fully compressed, so maximum danger. I'm going to see whether or not this is actually going to fit inside, which, looking at it right now, you would think there's no possible way that could work, but this thing has been very, very good. That is a really unhappy spring. Against all odds, this is the old spring, obviously, new spring. They are actually about the same length. And I'm genuinely surprised by that. And I don't know why, because obviously I've looked everything up and it's about right. We'll see if it fits back on now. Okay. And with that, one spring is released and a new spring is in place, and I think we're going to get away with this. We need to clock the spring because the top mount is almost certainly not in the same alignment that we need compared to the bushing on the bottom. The bushing on the bottom of the shock is also looking a little bit questionable, but since they didn't say anything about it being a problem on the MOT, I'm simply going to assume that it is fine and probably have to polybush it next year. I may be simultaneously the luckiest and unluckiest person to have tried to replace suspension on a Rodius. And I know that is a very narrow category, but frankly right now I'm taking the wins where I can get it. Because I started trying to get into the top mount and everything in the world is in the way of it. And that is an absolute nightmare to try and get past. But it gets worse than that because one of the bolts has completely rounded off. It looks like it's been hacked at by somebody, and I've tried to get a smaller socket on there and everything. It's just not doing. I'll show you what I mean. So you can see reservoirs live right above the right hand side top mount, which is really annoying. That bolt's not so bad. That one I've managed to get loose. The one around the back I've managed to remove completely, but the one inside here is completely chewed, and some of that is me trying to salvage this, but a lot of it was like that beforehand. So that's a cataclysmic problem because I have to get that bolt out to remove the strut to put the new spring on it. I've had to take the airbox out just to try and get tools on it because all of this pipe work with giant hands is just in the way. So that's all come apart. However, I had a quick look at the spring, and the spring looks brand new. Under here, the spring is clean. It still has the manufacturer's markings on. It just looks like it's got a little bit of dirt on, but is otherwise almost perfect. It cleans up fine. There's not even any cracking in the powder coat. It's just unreal that I might have got away with this. So with that being the case, I don't really feel the need to change the spring on this side. It already has a new spring on, and it appears to be almost identical to the replacement ones that I got from the Rexton. Definitely seems to be a bit thinner than the one I took off this side. That could just be a trick, but either way, I'm not going to look into it too deeply because I am now incentivized to not doing the spring on this side, given that bolt is so tight and impossible to remove. I just need to do the other ones back up, make sure that that one isn't going to slip, isn't going to lose. I'm going to put a pen mark on it just so I can keep an eye on it and make sure it's not going to move around and loosen now that it's a little bit chewed. But yeah, I'm astonished that I might be able to make my life so much easier by still only having to do the one side of this car. Just unbelievable. It also means that my assumption, if I got a used strut for this side, that the springs would have been kind of comparable because they'd both be worn, would have been absolutely incorrect because this one is obviously brand spanking new. Now I'm not going to send the other spring back because if that one turns out to be a slightly higher spring rate because it's a different part number, blah, 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 I can then take it somewhere and get some help to try and take this bolt off, or potentially drain the coolant, take the tank off, get in there and remove the bolt and fix it properly, put the other one on and do it that way if it really needs it. But for now, with a brand new spring that's not in bad condition, that's nowhere near as bad as the one on the other side looked, I'm going to run with it and call it good. That's the top end back together again, so a little bit of a waste of time starting to take that apart, but I am glad that I managed to get away with not taking that whole thing out. Hopefully between that spring and the new one we'll be okay. I'm not going to put the new one in now because it is very dark out here at this point. I can't see anything without this tiny little light, so we're going to leave that, the discs, the pads and the wheel bearing to next episode. And I know I said I was going to go through the MOT in a bit of detail and see what else we needed to do on this, but I'm not going to do that because this is already a very long episode and I'm sure you're tired of seeing me flail around with this car. Thanks very much for watching. If you have joined us just because of this or coming from the Autopian article, welcome to the channel. I hope the other projects are as entertaining with the GTO, the Golf, the kit car build and everything else. I hope you found something else that you like to watch too and will stick around a bit longer. You can also support us at shop.pedalbox.show, where you can buy much cleaner versions of the t-shirt that I'm actually wearing right now. And you can also join us on patreon.com/pedalboxshow for as little as $1 a month. And all of that does go into the big project that we're doing at the moment, that kit car, where we're still trying to buy a couple more little bits and pieces to get it over the line and get that engine started this side of Christmas. Fingers crossed. So thanks once again for watching, and hopefully we'll see you on the next episode on the Rodius, one of the other projects, or even one of the road trips. Thanks again.